This is chapter number 4, Tribals, Dekus, and the Vision of a Golden Age. So this chapter is all about British rule, what happened to the tribals in the British rule. And this vision of a golden age, it is related with Birsa Munda. So we'll take introduction with Birsa Munda, and then we'll go again back in the end part of the chapter about Birsa Munda. So we are talking about Janjati, Adivasi, tribal groups. So all in combined way, we will call them as tribal groups. So what we have seen in the earlier discussion, that how these peasants and farmers got affected under British rule. And similarly, we are going to see what tribal faced, what scenario they were forced to under British rule. So British rule, Birsa Munda. Now we will discuss about Birsa Munda in a great detail. But for time being, in 1895, there was a man called Birsa Munda. And he was found roaming around the forest of villages of Chota Nagpur in Bihar. So he was going here and there, and people were following him. Whatever he is speaking, people thought that this man has supernatural powers. He has miraculous powers. That means, first of all, he can cure all the diseases. Any kind of diseases, Birsa Munda can cure you. Along with this, he has the power to multiply the grains. For example, one container, he can make it as 5 containers. And after all these, Birsa Munda himself declared that the God, the Almighty, has appointed me to save the people from the trouble. The trouble, that means the problems not only with British rules, but others, outsiders. Free all these Adivasis or tribal groups from these misery and slavery from Dekus. So Dekus are specially this word used for the outsiders. Those who are the reason of the plight and distress of the tribal groups, he called them as Dekus, outsiders. It may be traders, it may be moneylenders, it may be contractors or Europeans, especially the Britishers. All these are outsiders, Dekus. So thousands of people were following Birsa Munda, and they were giving him that position of God. So now Birsa Munda, why his name is Munda? Because he comes from a tribal group called Munda. So as I said, lived in Chota Nagpur. And not only Munda, the followers of Birsa was coming from different tribes as well. That is, the followers include Santhals and Oraons. So the Santhals and Oraons along with Mundas, they all were following Birsa Munda. So he had a huge follower base, and those all were linked to him because they wanted freedom from these Dekus. Okay? Because everyone was unhappy in their own concern, in their own terms. Because they were facing various troubles, challenges under the British rule. Okay? Either be Mundas or the Santhals or Oraons, all were facing some or the other problem. First thing is that the way they used to live, the familiar way they used to live, it was disappearing. It was being stopped or being blocked. Because there was a natural way in which this tribal group used to live. The livelihood, the way they eat, they earn, this all were under threat. It was almost lost. And the religion or whatever traditional beliefs they have, traditional culture they have, this was also in danger. because of the British rule, because of all these decus. Okay, so religion, religious belief, livelihood, and the conventional way or traditional way of their life, they all were under threat. So that is why mostly people were following Birsa Munda, and they were not very much in favor of British rule or the outsiders. So what were the problems? Why Birsa Munda has come up, people started following him, what he actually set out to resolve, what problems he wanted to resolve. And we'll see the Decus. Who were Decus? Don't think that Decus were only Europeans or Britishers. Decus are all the outside people, outside the tribal group or tribal community, who wanted to enslave these people, tribal groups, or who wanted to make their usage of these people and make them poor, make them more dependent. So what was the lives or life situation under British rule? This we'll see. And how the life changed. So I'll show you a picture. These are the picture of Dongariya Kandha tribe. These are the women of Dongariya Kandha tribe in Odisha. Odisha, Jharkhand, lower belt of this Uttar Pradesh, Northeast, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, you will find various places the Adivasis or the tribal groups that normally used to live in forest. So as I was saying, how the lives change. And the tribal society, if I take you to the tribal society, now listen to me, that the tribal society, tribal groups, because we are living in urban areas, we are living in some different place. At that time also people used to live in the cities, etc. So the lives were different. The beliefs were different. So in the tribal society, there were no sharp differences as per social division. For example, if you take a normal way of life, what we are living, or the people used to live there, okay, we don't live in a forest. And Brahmans, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Ati Shudra, these were the prevalent social divisions coming from ancient India. So these are already there. Till now we have it. So these caste societies, these social divisions are not there in the tribal groups. There are divisions, but not that kind of sharp divisions. For example, in Muslims, like tribals, they don't have any Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya. Everyone is equal. These tribal groups, you think that they are all belonging to the same tribe. How? Because they are in a bond of kinship, kutumb, like father, mother, grandfather, grandmother. So they are related to some or common ties of kinship, parivarvad, relationship. Okay. But you don't say, or we can't say very properly that the social and economic differences were not there. Some would have power, some will have money. So you cannot say they don't have these differences, but not that sharp differences the other society, the normal society of Indian subcontinent was having. Okay. Now, these words are coming. Fallow means a land which is cultivation has done and the harvesting is done. Now this land is not fertile. So it is left for some time to regain the fertility. And this is called a fallow land. Parti zameen. So it is left for fertility. Sal and mahua. Basically these are trees. So sal is a tree and mahua basically it's a tree and it produces flower also and seeds also. So these flower are being eaten and this mahua seeds and other flowers are used to make alcohol. This is the picture of Dongariya Kandha women and they have these different leaves, okay, pandanus leaves on their head. If you go to Chhattisgarh, you will see all the tribals having tendu patta leaves, tendu leaves used for various purposes. Now the question comes, how did the tribal groups live? Okay, then we'll know what happened to their living. First, let us understand how do they live. Few of them would do jhum kheti, jhum cultivation. Some of them would be hunters and gatherers. Here I am going to tell you about. Some of them were herding animals, they were herders. Some of them were shepherds, gadariya. And one more thing is there, that is, some of them used to settle cultivation. For example, if 100 people are there, 25 will do jhum, 25 herding and this hunting and gathering, 25 will do this herding, rearing animals, and 25 of them will stay at one place and do the cultivation at one place. That is the stagnant kind of cultivation. Okay, so these, at that time which we are talking about, the time when the Britishers were here or the Europeans were here, so at this time 4 major type of tribal groups were there. So we will talk about them and then we'll try to understand how do they live and what happened to them after Britishers had some law or what they did. So let me show you all the places where they belong. We'll start from the above. This is, all the names are taken in your chapter. Okay. So we'll talk about this Van Gujars first and Gaddis. So you need to have the broad idea of which tribes has or are prevalent in which area. This is Himachal Pradesh area, the lower part of Jammu Kashmir and the eastern part of Punjab. So these are Gaddis and Van Gujars. So these are at Punjab hills. Then coming to Uttarakhand, Bhotia tribe. Northeast there are various tribes, Naga, Nagaland, Apatani, Nishi, Khasi, Maiti, Riyang, Khasi, Hazarang. So all these are northeastern tribes. Coming to Rajasthan, we have Saharia and Bhil. Saharia and Bhil in Rajasthan. Coming to Gujarat, Van Gujars and Rathwa and Van Gujars. Coming to the Madhya Pradesh part, we have, and these are the lower part of Madhya Pradesh, okay. Mostly if you see the Uttar Pradesh, you don't get. So there are common also. If you see there are certain tribes which are common. MP, Banjara, Baigas, Banjara, Gond. Odisha we have Paraja, Bonda, Kandha, Koya, Saura and Konds. Gonds you see in both the parts. That is, you get this in Chhattisgarh also and MP also. Baigas, Maria, Gonds. Okay. Baigas, Maria, Gonds are in MP and Chhattisgarh also. Bengal we have Santhal. And Bengal and Bihar, it's not Bihar, basically it's a lower part of Bihar which is Jharkhand. So Santhal, Munda, Oraon. That is what we are talking about, the Birsa Munda. Coming to Maharashtra, we have Banjara. Okay. Banjara. Then we just go down on the right part, that is the Andhra Pradesh area. This is Koya, Banjara, Gonds. Okay, Andhra Pradesh. Koya, Banjara, Gonds. Then coming to the Mala Irular of Kerala, and in our the islands we have Jarawas, this Andaman and Nicobar Island. All these ships, they are also called as Jarawas here, named as Jarawas, Indian ships, Indian naval ships. So these are Jarawas, Car Nicobar. Okay, why I told you? Because whenever I take the name, you need to understand where these tribals used to live and still till date where all these are prevalent. So the first thing is, some of them will do jhum cultivation. What is jhum cultivation? It's not jhum ke nacho or jhum ke gao. It's jhum cultivation. Like slash and burn technique. So this is slash and burn technique of cultivation. And this is done in a place where varied terrain is there. And this slash and burn is also called bewad, where This is called Bewad, is the same Jhum Kheti, but it is called as Bewad in Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh, Bewad is same as Jhum Kheti, Jhum cultivation. So basically in the hilly area, very terrain, where the water is scarce and the soil is dry, this Jhum cultivation is done. Okay, Jhum, slash and burn, Bewad, they all are same. So let me tell you what happens. So this is a forest. Okay. Now one thing is important, because the problem, what the problem came. So you need to understand what they had and what they wouldn't have when the Britishers will have their these forest laws. So one land they will take from the forest, these are tribal groups, and what they will do, the small part of a jungle, and they will cut the trees which are blocking the sunshine. So very big trees they would cut. The tree tops basically, that allows the sunlight to reach the ground, the cultivators would cut. And the vegetation here, they will burn it. They will burn it, all the vegetation. So finally, the vegetation will convert to ash, rock. Now, if I talk about NPK, nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. This NPK is very important for the land, fertile land. This is what our fertilizers do. So the rock or the ash, this gives a lot of potash. Okay, so it's kind of a way to make the land fertile, because they have already burned, and this ash is used to increase the fertility. They will use axe, kulhadi to cut trees, and hoe means sabbal, to scratch the soil. That is, if you just take your hand and rub it or scratch it, that is, you are peeling out your top layer of your skin. Okay, that is the same way they are peeling off the top layer of the land. Okay, just for this ash to mix. They won't use the bullocks and the hull and bell, they don't use. Okay, so they will only do the scratching. They won't use hoe, kudal or sabbal, and axe means kulhadi. So they will just scratch it and they prepare it for cultivation. And finally what they do? They won't use this hull and bullocks. They won't use the conventional way. They will just take the seed and spread it, throw it, scatter it, take in hand and spread it. They will not prepare the land, tractor or bullock or any way, and they will sow it in a way, conventional way. No, they will just throw it, scatter it. So they will not plow or sow. Please understand, no plowing, no sowing. Just ash, scratching of the upper layer and just scattering or spreading this. Once the crop is ready, when you put seed, the crop will come. And once this will come, they will leave this land and they'll take some other land, go to some other part of this forest. And whatever they have done here, same story is repeated here also. Same story. Same slash and burn technique is used. So the previous land where cultivation is done, harvesting is done, is left as a fallow land. Once harvesting is done in the second land, they leave it and go to the third land. So they will leave all these lands as fallow land, because the fertility will come in due course of time. So this fallow land is Parti Zameen. They will leave it. So what we found is this shifting cultivation is done mainly in hilly and forest land of northeastern part or states and central India. Okay. And as I said, the central India, northeast part, Madhya Pradesh we are talking about, and the northeastern state, these are done because the water is scarce and the hilly terrain is there. So basic thing is that tribals can take the forest, they can go, they will do Jhum Kheti, Jhum cultivation. So now the Jhum Kheti can only be done when they are free to allow in the market, in the forest. But this was taught by the Britishers. Okay. Now the next one comes is about hunters and gatherers. The second type of tribals who are doing hunting and gathering. Okay. So we'll talk about all the herders and the people who used to stay at one place and do the cultivation. So how did tribal groups live? So I told you about the jhum cultivators. Some of them were jhum cultivating. Some of them were still doing the hunting and gathering. That is Akhetak and Sangrahak. Few of them were herding animals. And then few of them were actually doing the settled cultivation. So if I take you back, so some were doing hunting and gathering. This is a long back, if you start the evolution of a human being, hunting and gathering is always the starting point. It was the starting point. So whatever there was in forest, it is for eating, it is for selling, for any purpose. It can be, to keep or to sell. So all these tribal groups, they were hunting animals, and also whatever is beneficial for eating and selling, they were gathering it. So they found that this forest is very essential for their survival, for their being. I'm talking about khonds. This is the khonds I'm showing, and this is from Odisha. Normally these people are found in Odisha. So what they will do, the group of people or the tribal groups, the men would go for hunting together. They will go together, and when they hunt, say a deer or someone, then they divide the meat equally amongst themselves. They also eat fruit, roots of plant, kandamul. Previously also our ancient people, they used to eat fruit and roots, and they would cook food, and cooking of food, for that they will use oil, and this oil was extracted from the seeds of sal and mahua. I'll show you the mahua just now in a bit. So seeds of sal and mahua, they will extract oil and they will make their food for medicinal purpose, because every human being will have some or the other problem. They use shrubs and herbs, jadi booty, shrubs and herbs, for any problem if they have some cut or they are not feeling well. So whatever they gather, they will sell it to the near forest wherever they are living, the local market. They would sell their forest produce. So if you see the local weaver, bunkar, and the people who are working in leather, field, that is leather worker, they will always come to khonds because they needed kusum and palash flowers to color clothes and leather. So in order to color this cloth and leather, they will always turn to khonds, because khonds will provide them these kusum and palash, right? So that because they were getting it from the forest, the khonds were gathering it from the forest. So again, means most of the things which are coming from forest produce, people were dependent on them. Now the questions arises, okay, palash kusum is okay, meat is also okay. What about rice and grain? We cannot eat food without rice and grain. Dal chawal, roti. So rice or grains can be any, it can be, big grains also like bajra, jowar. So what will happen? They will exchange them. That is, the tribal groups will exchange them with whatever they get from the forest in trade of rice and grain. So they will give their forest produce and they will take these rice and grains. And whatever they are getting a little bit money, because they would sell it to the local market, their gatherings, they will buy some other thing, and they will also do some jobs also. For example, the nearby village, because they were living in the forest. So nearby village, they will carry load, they will build road, and there will be labor in fields of peasants. That is, the peasant farmer, they might hire them as laborer to work in their field. But the problem is, whenever the supplies of the forest, it shrank, means every time forest will not produce everything. If you take it out, it will take some time to reproduce it. They'll go for laborers. But if I tell you about Baigas, see, these are Baiga tribals in Madhya Pradesh. These Baiga tribals, unlike the others who will go outside for laborship, they are very reluctant. They don't want to work for others. They are just saying that forest is for them, they are for the forest, and if they work as laborer, this will be below their izzat, their dignity. They will never become a laborer. Okay, so this is about certain tribes, for example, Baiga. Now, tribals would want to sell, also buy certain thing. There are certain goods, certain produce, they would buy and sell. Okay, which is not produced where they live, in their locality, wherever they live. Certain things they can produce by themselves, but for certain things they have to be dependent on certain people, like the traders, like the money lenders. So the traders would come to trade, that is to sell them something which they don't have, and to buy which they have in excess. So traders would come, and also money lenders would come, Mahajan. Money lenders would give them cash, they give them easy loan. So every one of us wants money. So the tribals also want money, because there are certain things they can only buy with money. So the money lender would give them some money, and traders will give certain things, but the price will be very high. The traders will give stuff in very high prices, and the money lender will give cash or money in very huge loan. For example, the traders, if they are giving it for 10 rupees somewhere else, they will give in 30 rupees to the tribals. And the money lenders, say, if they are giving say 100 bucks or some money, they will charge very high, huge this interest on this loan. That is, the traders and money lenders, they are seeing an opportunity to make money with these poor tribals. Let me tell you, the money lenders will give loan, and they will give 100, and they'll say, okay, you return us 150. So this 50 rupee margin, or I'm just giving an example, this was huge. Money lenders, they can charge any loan or any interest on any loan. Okay, so now the tribals were in both the ways. They are giving high prices, and they are giving heavy interest on the loans also. So in the market and commerce, for these tribals, that is market because of the traders, and commerce because of these money lenders. Now these tribals, they actually slowly and gradually went into debt, lot of debt, that is loan, and poverty, because when you don't have money and you have to buy certain things in very huge price, you become poor. So they became poor and in lot of debt. So finally these tribals were seeing these money lenders and traders as what? As evil outsiders, as those people who are coming from outside community and harming their lives in terms of debt, in terms of money, in terms of poverty. That is the misery what they are facing. Tribals are only because of these traders and money lenders. Okay, some of them jhoom, some of them hunting gathering, some of them herding animals. So these herding animals, if you see all the examples given in this book, is about herding animals is shown here. Okay, some would rear goat, sheep, some would rear cow, even yak, and oot, camel. So depending upon what they produce, like the milk, like the meat, and they have the fur, good furs also. Wool can be made because of their fur. And since this milk is itself a starting product, it can be made as butter, it can be made as in the form of ghee, and all those formations, asli ghee, etc. Now, some of the tribes will do herding. So they will herd animals and they will rear animals. That is, they will get all the stuff from them and they will sell all the stuff they are getting from them. So pastoralist, that is, pasture means a big area where a lot of grass is there. So they will herd cattle or small animals like sheep according to the seasons. Different seasons they will herd different animals, and they will put them into grazing in these pastures. So they are basically pastoralists. Okay, wherever they see the grass, once this grass is exhausted, they'll change the position, they'll go to some other area. So basically they keep on moving from one place to another. Depending upon the season, they will go. Depending upon the availability of grass, they will go. Khana badosh. They are not staying at one place. So these are one Gujars of Punjab Hills. I showed you already in the earlier discussion. This is one Gujars of Punjab Hills. Okay, Punjab Hills. So you can relate this with Punjab also, somewhat Jammu Kashmir, somewhat below area. Then these are Labadis of Andhra Pradesh. So Punjab Hills, one Gujars. Now coming to the Kullu, Gaddis of Kullu, they are also Gadariyas. That is, they are also rearing and herding sheep, etc. Now Bakarwals of Kashmir, if you happen to go from Jammu to Srinagar, in that part you will see mostly these people, and they would walk hundreds of kilometers with all these disciplined animals, and people would respect them. They stop their rasta or road, but still, they'll just go. So they were herding animals, right? These are all tribal groups. Okay, I'll just come to this discussion, but before that, let me tell you that there were some tribals, they were doing actual cultivation while settling down. So they were actually settled and they were doing on the same land, same cultivation, means cultivation on the same land. So before the 19th century even, various tribal groups, they started settling down at one place and then cultivating their fields in one place, only one place, year after year. What does it mean? They are not now moving from one place to another. Earlier they were doing, all the tribals mostly they were doing. So they got the rights over the land. In many cases they got the right of that land. In many cases, for example, in Mundas, Mundas of Chota Nagpur, the land belonged to whole clan. Kul means whole group which is staying at certain place. The land belongs to everyone, each of them. I am talking about Mundas of Chota Nagpur. And not only Mundas, there are various other tribals. They think that land belongs to everyone. But sometimes, always it happens, some will become powerful, some will not. So these who acquire power in that tribe only, they will become Mukhya or chief. So when they acquire enough power or economic power and muscle power, they'll become chief, and others, they will rent the land. So other will be tenant basically of these chiefs. Okay, so all these are good, but what British officials are thinking? British officials were thinking at this time that those people who are settled, like the Gonds and the Santhals, so these are Gonds and Santhal, these tribes are civilized, they are more disciplined, because the British officials were not liking whom? These people, because these people are moving every time. There is no fixed place. One time they are here, sometime they are there. So those who are moving here and there, British officials, they were not liking them. They are calling them as wild, savage, Berber, not good people, right? Okay. Only the disciplined people for Britishers is those who will stay at one place and live. Okay. So this is how British idea was. Now I'll take you to a very important discussion here. It has a lot of content, it may be asked. See, whole year how the tribes, how the tribe women, how the tribe men will do what and when. In which period they'll do what and when. So here the name is Verrier Elwin. He is a British anthropologist. Verrier Elwin was a British anthropologist, and he actually lived among the tribal famous tribes like Baigas and Khonds. So Verrier Elwin lived with these important tribes for various years. To be precise, in 1930s and 1940s, more than 10 years of span. So he lived with them and he understood their life quite well. How actually they work, how actually they all year around, what is their schedule, what is their timetable, what women would do, what men would do. Okay, that is what the content of this discussion is. What is he wrote. Okay, so this is regulated by a calendar, whatever is happening, and division of task. And men would do certain task, women would do certain task. In which time, what will be done? He gave a very detailed analysis and discussion. So there is a word going to come. Now there is a word going to come, Vaisakhi. And this is known as Vaisakhi also, and this is the Sikh New Year. And this is a spring harvest festival, not only celebrated in Punjab, but also in other parts of northern India. This is also 13th April, which marks the formation of Khalsa Panth by Guru Gobind Singh Ji in year 1699. Okay, so these are various names. So Mahua seeds will also come here. So these I just wanted to show you because we earlier also discussed about Mahua and Sal. So these are the Mahua seeds which I wanted to just highlight here. Okay, so now one more word will come. This in Madhya Pradesh, the jhum cultivation area is called as Bewad or Bewad. And there are certain words going to come like Chat, Baisakh, Jet, Ashad, Sawan, Bhado, Kuar, Kartik, Agahan, Poos, Magh, Fagun. So all these are basically months. So Chat is from March to April. And if you go to winter, from October to say November and October to December, it would be Kartik and Agahan. And December, January also Poos. So depending upon the months, these names are being used. And Verrier Elwin said that what happens at what time. So let us start with the start. In Chat, that is at this period, March to April. So in Chat, women went to cut stalks which already reaped. So whatever thoot was remaining, women would collect them or cut these stalks. And men would cut large trees. And they will go for a hunting. That is a ritual hunting they would do. We are talking about Baigas and Khonds. So this is specifically about Baigas and Khonds. The hunt will become at Purnima, full moon. And this hunting, they will use bamboo traps. They will use traps or bamboos. And this is used for hunting as far as Baigas and Khonds are concerned. Women would gather sago, tamarind, imli and mushroom. Right? So women would gather these. And Baiga women will gather roots of kanda and mahua. Kanda is not, pyaz, because in Maharashtra, kanda is pyaz. So kanda is basically a root, kandamul type. Okay. So this they will do. And then along with this, Baigas, what they will do, they actually were best hunters. They were regarded as best hunters. Baigas are best hunters. Shikari, they are best shikari. In Baisakh, as I just told you, the firing of the forest. After that, there were some unburned wood. So whatever unburned wood is there, women would gather in Baisakh. Okay. And in Jade, the sowing will take place, but hunting will still be going on. From Asad to Bhado, men would work in field, and in Kuar, see here, Kuar I am showing you. So Sharat Patajhad you can call it as. In Kuar, fresh fruits, beans, phalia, fresh fruit phalia, beans will ripen, and in Kartik, kutki, they will actually ripe, ready for use. In Aghan, every crop is ready now, and in Pus, winnowing will take place. Pus, at this time, dances and marriage will take place in Pus. In Magh, people would go to Bevar, that is the Jhoom, and hunting gathering was also taking place. First year it's okay, second year they get more time for hunting because few crops had to be sown and harvested. But third year they need to get some crop in addition with the forest products. So these are all the accounts of very relevant. One more picture is Santhal girl carrying firewood in Bihar 1946. Okay. So now you have a fair idea how these different people will doing different work. And we will talk about now the actual effect of British rule. So how did colonial rule affect tribals? So when the colonial rule came, how their lives got changed, how their life actually changed. I'm talking about different tribes. So what happened to the tribal chief? See, every tribe had a chief, it becomes automatically sometimes. So before the British government, the Mukhia or the chief, tribal chief, is holding a very important position, and he was a very important people. He was economically sound also, he had economic power, and also they have right to administer also, because they can control their territories as well. Okay, along with this, because they can administer and control, they need to have their own police. So they will keep their own police people. Okay, and they also have all the right to decide the local rules for the land also and the forest also. So in order to manage forest and land, they will lay down their own rules and regulations. These village chief or the tribal chief. Okay. Now, but when the British came, they said, tribal chiefs, okay, keep your land. We will not mind it. But whatever you are administering, Prashasan, all the powers you have, no. You have to do everything on the basis of our laws. The laws, the rules and regulation now will be ours. Like that is the British rules and regulation you need to follow. Okay. And also you have to give us money. You have to give us, pay some tribute also. And one more thing, you have to keep your people, because you are like Mukhia, you are chief. You have to keep all the people under you or who are following you in discipline. They don't become unruly. You have to keep this in mind. This is what British people were saying, these chiefs. Okay. So what happened to the shifting cultivators now? Those people who are going from one place to another. So in British rule, always they lay down their own rules and regulation. So for them, if they want to implement these, they want people to stay at one place. They don't want that these people to go here and there, change position. That is, they want them to be a settled down peasant or farmer. For example, if someone has an address or a phone number, you can easily identify them. You can send letter to them. But if a person is moving here and there, sometimes he is in Jammu Kashmir, sometimes Bengal, sometimes Tamil Nadu. So, in order to get money, revenue from these peasants and farmers, in order to put kar, tax or lagan on them, these peasant farmers should be staying at one place. That is what British wanted. So what they did, they started introducing certain land settlements. In land settlement, they said that they measured the land, they defined the land. If you remember, Mahalwari and Rayatwari, all these were happening. So they said, okay, you have to give revenue. This much is revenue which you owe us, and this much amount you have to give us. So some peasants now were regarded or declared as landowners like zamindars, and others were automatically become tenants of these zamindar. That is, these people will work for zamindar. Okay. So the basic work was the Tenants will give rent to Zamindar and Zamindar will give revenue to the company or to the British officials. British government, these revenues will be sent by Zamindar, who in turn will collect from tenant. So British in jhum cultivators, they were not very successful because the area where jhum cultivation was going on, it is ancient time. Because they don't have any option. The water was not there. The soil is dry. Even stepwise is very also difficult. Stepwise cultivation is also difficult, which people see. I am showing you the northeast area where jhum kheti is taking place. So the plough cultivation and hal bal, like the plough cultivation, bullock cultivation, means using bullock, it was not possible. Again, let me tell you, the water was very less, scarce, and the soil is quite dry. So there is no other option other than jhum cultivation. If someone has to eat something, he has to cultivate something. So when the British saw this problem and the northern eastern state, they insisted, they put a lot of protest against what they want. They wanted to do the traditional practice. So finally the British saw that there is no possibility that we can tell them to do something else. So they allowed some of the people, tribals, to do and to continue the shifting cultivation as their ancient practice. Okay, I want to show you certain pictures here. This man is making his house. He is from Nishi tribe of Northeast, and he is using, and a whole village will come to make this using wood or log. This is a picture of Bhil, Bhil, Bhil women of Gujarat, and they are working in the forest. Bhil women cultivating in a forest in Gujarat. This is Andhra Pradesh picture. This is a picture of Andhra Pradesh, and rice is they are working on. So the Britishers, the company, they made some forest laws, and these forest laws, they greatly impacted the lives of everyone, and we are talking about tribal groups here. So what changes of Farms Law, what introduction of Farms Law impacted them? Considerably. First is, they said all the forests are now under our control. That is, they declared them, all the forests of India, as their state property. That is, it is government property, right? For example, today also all the forests are Indian property, the forest department property. So this state property was an important matter. That is, no Janjati, no Adivasi, no tribal groups can hold it, can claim it. And some of the forests, they were called or regarded as reserved forest. Arakshit Vanya. Why reserved forest? Why it was being reserved? Because these particular forests were producing some certain kind of stuff for the Britishers. That is, for example, timber. This was very useful for the Britishers. That is why this was regarded, certain forests were regarded as reserve. What does it mean to the tribal is, no one can move freely, no Adivasi can move freely. They cannot practice their jhum cultivation here. They cannot collect any fruit. They can't even hunt animals. So what is the normal life for the Adivasis? They cannot do. All these three were not possible specifically in this reserved forest. Okay, what will happen if you remove someone from his home where he lives for ages? So he'll go for work. He will leave that place and go for some other place to work to learn his livelihood. Now there is a problem with the Britishers. What problem they faced? For example, this forest produces timber. For example, these kind of wooden planks you see, these are horizontal planks used especially in railway lines because this holds that railway line. These are very important for the railway lines. So these are called sleepers. Now these wooden planks, which are very important for the Britishers because they were laying the railway lines. Now who is going to work with it? Work for it? Who is going to cut the trees? Who is going to make the timber, wood, plank? Who is going to as a labor who is going to take it from one place to another, because already the Adivasis you have said it is reserved, you cannot enter. So the problem was a labor problem for the Britishers. So what do? Finally, the forest department at that time, because one more thing is that this is a very huge forest. Who is going to take care of this forest? Because you need to have a knowledge of forest to understand it, to care it. They need cheap labor and take care of someone to take care, like a chowkidar, like a watchman. So what do? They came up with a solution. The solution was that they gave some certain land and allowed the Adivasis tribals to stay, to do jhum cultivation, but with certain conditions. What were the conditions? The first condition was that first you are going to provide us labor, either free or with very, very, very nominal price, very low wages. Means the money given for this labor will not be that much. Okay, second important thing was that you have to look after the forest. Your job is to give us labor and then provide the watchmanship to the forest. Then only we are going to give you this land. Okay. Now, on account of all this happening, various tribals, because of these forest laws, because they were very distressing, very damankari, so most of them reacted. Many tribals reacted. Certain time they also disobeyed. That is, basically they rebelled against the forest laws. For example, in Assam, I'll give you some examples. Like Assam in 1906, there was Songram Sangma. So this was a proper rebellion against the Britishers. This picture which you see here is the Chirner Jungle Satyagraha 1930, Forest Satyagraha. So this happened in 1930 at central provinces, today's Madhya Pradesh. So this also happened. Okay, let me show you these pictures, then I'll go to some other topic. Here you see Godara women, they are weaving, bunkar. This is a Hajang woman. She is weaving a mat along with a kid, carrying a baby. Very emotional picture this is. So the problem was, what was the problem they are facing with trade now? These people. Let me just clear it and then I'll tell you another problem. So during the 19th century I'm talking about, these tribals, they saw that certain people are coming too often, to their places. They saw the traders and the money lenders. These two kind of people, they're always coming to their place and they're coming for various reasons. First is, the traders want to buy the forest produce. The money lenders are offering cash loans. They're offering loans. And both of them are asking for wages also. Means they can take them, these tribals, for labors. Contractors were also coming. So now these things happening, the tribals later knew that what problem they are going to create. So I'll give you an example of silk. Okay, silk growers. Silk comes from a kida, a worm. Okay, now this is a worm and it creates a cocoon. When it's about to die, it creates a cocoon, and this cocoon is how silk is made. Who made it, or who? Because in the Western market, Indian silk was dominating, or it was in great demand. So that is how because the demand was too much, the companies said, okay, how to get it. So they started doing this. Means the example I'm taking, Hazaribagh I'm taking example. This is the present day Jharkhand. So in this, Santals were rearing cocoons. They were silk growers. So these worms, they were rearing, and then cocoon finally they were collecting, and then finally they were selling it. And this shetut is a kind of tree where this worm will grow. So basically they were rearing them. So when they were making, so the Britishers, what they do, through certain contractors, some traders and contractors would come, bichauliya, the middlemen. So this middlemen would come, they will take them, buy them from the Santhals. For example, 1000, they will just give 3 to 4 rupees. Just. And then they will export them to Burdwan, which is West Bengal, and Gaya, which is present day Bihar. So this is how they were exported. And the middlemen, they incur huge profits. That is 3 or 4 rupees they give to them, and they may sell it for say 30, 40 rupees. Okay, so 30, 40 rupees they are selling, and it's 5, 10 times they are getting the profits. So traders and moneylenders giving them to rear to do this job, and traders taking them with low prices, selling them in the higher prices to other people. So finally, these tribals thought and they understood that these tribals and moneylenders are all the enemies, shaitan, and they are the creators of their misery. So let me show you certain more pictures. I'll just talk about this. This is coal miners of Bihar, 1948. So in 1920s, more than 50% of the miners in these mines, coal mines, were from Bihar. And means not from Bihar, working in Bihar were tribals. And these tribals can come from anywhere, from Chhattisgarh, from any place, Karnataka. So this is a Bihar coal mine, but in 1920s, over 2,000 workers who were actually tribals, they died. And this happens today also. Most of the people who are working are tribals. Okay, now they have to work. Everyone has to work because the forests were reserved and they were not allowed to go inside. So I'm talking about this late 19th century. There were two industries. One is mining and one is tree plantation. These two businesses, they were growing, coming up. Important industry they were regarded as. So the tribals, they were recruited through certain contractors. Okay, the coal mines of Jharkhand and the tea plantation of Assam. So who were recruiting them for the tea plantation of Assam and coal mines of Jharkhand? Certain contractors. And these contractors, they were giving them very less price, low wages, very low price. Along with this, they won't allow them to return back to their home from wherever they have come. So though two problems these miners and the tea planters, they faced, low wages, and they couldn't go back to their home. Okay. So this was the problem with this. So let me take you to some closer look. I'm talking about 19th and 20th century. These tribals, they stood up and they rebelled against the laws, against the restriction the British has put on them, right? The practices they would do, whatever they do, like shikar, hunting, etc. New taxes were imposed on them. They have to pay taxes. And finally, the traders and moneylenders, these two were exploiting them, tribals. So the contractors, moneylender, traders, they were exploiting them. So all the problems actually, when it got combined, the people rebelled, the tribals rebelled against the Dikus. For example, coals. In 1831-32, they rebelled. Santhal, they rebelled. They revolted in 1855. There was a Bastar rebellion. Okay, we are talking about Chhattisgarh and previously the Madhya Pradesh in central India in 1910, not 1855, it's 1910. And then in Maharashtra also, Worli revolt. Means everywhere people stood up because these things were very distressing and oppressing for these people, for tribal group. Okay. So because of these problems, the revolt took place. Now we have already talked about Birsa Munda, and let us talk in detail now. Now Birsa Munda, he was born in mid 1870s. He was born in mid 1870s. He was a son of a very poor father. So when he grew up in the forest of Bohonda. Bohonda or Bohonda. Okay. Now he would do everything which a normal tribal would do: graze sheep, play the flute, dance in the local akhada. All these normal things he would do. Okay. Every tribal normally will do this. So when he was growing up, Birsa was growing up, he heard the stories and tales of Munda uprising, Munda rebellion, Munda revolt. He understood and he heard that the Sardars, the Mukhiya, the chieftains of Munda tribe, they were urging people to collect, gain power and revolt. So these Sardars were telling that there was a golden age when the Mundas used to go and move freely, and they were free from these Dikus, from the outsiders, like the moneylenders, like the traders, like the contractors. Okay. And whatever ancestral rights they have lost, whatever they had in earlier times, now this time has come to get them back, to restore them. This is what he heard. Okay, basically it's the kingdom which they have. The chieftains wanted them to get it back. Now Birsa Munda, initially he went to a local missionary school, that is a Christian school. So these sermons, the Updesh, he would listen to it. And he heard that the sermons were saying that the Mundas can attain that heavenly kingdom which they once had. They can regain it. That is all the lost rights. That is only possible when they become Christians and they stop doing any bad practices, or they will give up the bad practices. I'll just tell you that, like liquor and beating people and doing bad things. So this he heard from there. Second step, after some time, Birsa Munda, he spent time with a Vaishnav preacher. Vaishnav is who worships Vishnu Bhagwan. So he actually had a Janayu at that time, sacred thread. And basically he learned the idea of purity and piety of body and mind and soul. So this is what he learned from the Vaishnavas. He learned something from missionaries also. So Birsa Munda, he actually propelled a movement. And basically the movement was aimed to reform his tribal society. And he requested the Mundas to stop drinking liquor, to be clean and to keep their village clean. Also, the witchcraft and sorcery, Dayan and Jadu Tona, he said stop believing in all this, sorcery and witchcraft. Okay, and the most important thing is Birsa turned against the missionaries as well as the Hindu landlords. Because the missionaries and Hindus, he was thinking that these are outside forces and they were actually changing the Munda's way of life. That is why he was against those with whom he used to stay earlier. Pandits also and the Christians also. So now in 1895, this is the background. So Vaishnavas, as I said, they were Vishnu followers. Now in 1895, Birsa actually urged all the followers that let us get our glorious past. Now just stand up and fight to get our glorious past, Munda past. He was talking about Satyug. That is the age where everything will be true, age of truth, Satyug. That is the way they used to have good life, constructed the embankment, Tadband, tapped natural springs, jharne. They planted trees and orchards also. They would do cultivation for themselves, practice cultivation. So these things they were doing. And also, they won't kill we won't kill any relative or brother we call it. We want everyone to live honestly, and we want everyone to settle down and cultivate in the fields. So this 1895 he urged his followers. But when the British learned this, heard this, that Birsa Munda is saying all these things to his followers. Now Birsa movement, they understood that the Birsa movement or Birsa wanted to drive out the missionaries, the moneylenders, the Hindu landlords, the Mahajans, the government, etc. Everyone. That is, he want to have his own Raj or kingdom. So this Birsa want everyone to go out. They wanted to have a Birsa Raj. So finally what happened? This land policies, British, the Birsa was saying that it was destroying the traditional land system. Hindu landlords and moneylenders, they were taking their land, the Munda's land, and the missionaries and others, they are actually criticizing their religion and traditional culture they had. So British thought that now we have to do something big. So finally, Birsa Munda was arrested in 1895 and he was finally convicted. And the conviction was for rioting. That is, he was planning a riot and then he was jailed for 2 years. Birsa Munda was jailed for 2 years. Finally, after 2 years, in 1897, after 2 years, he was released also. Then when he came back, he was just gathering power or support, going here and there, and was talking about destroying the Ravana. Ravan was Dekus and the Europeans, basically Englishmen. So he urged to do something big. So followers, what they did, they started doing, they were targeting, they were destroying, they were targeting the symbol of Dekus, whatever moneylenders have, they were attacking the police station, the churches as well, and the properties which moneylenders and zamindar had, they started raiding the property of moneylenders and zamindars. And also they had a white flag that this is for Birsa Raj. This all happened, but in 1900, after 3 years, Birsa died of cholera, Heza, and the movement then faded out. But the main key is that this rebellion, this revolt or this movement actually gave 2 points or were important in 2 ways, very important, significant in 2 ways. The first was that now the Britishers have to make certain laws, some strict law, that the tribal land cannot be taken so easily. First is this. Second was that the Adivasis, the tribal, the Janjati, they are not mum, they have tongue, they have mind, they can protest. Any injustice done against them, they can protest. And also they can express their anger. Okay. So both the things came up from this movement and everybody understood. Whole India and world knew that now. Okay, this all happened. So there were Adivasis, Janjati tribal groups also. I'm talking about Papua New Guinea is just above Australia. Here people are saying that we are doing cash crops. What do? We cannot eat money. We have to eat rice and grain. Okay, we can only eat something which we can eat. We are forcing us to do this cash crops, etc. So the pain they were showing. So it's not only in India, cash cropping they were talking about. In India, we also talked about some cash crops, okay, like indigo, etc. in earlier times. Okay, this is all about this topic. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.